Just a news break, and we want to jump in here and talk about the case that we're covering right now. The case down in Uvalde regarding the Uvalde, Texas school shooting. That is absolutely one of the saddest events in our country's history as far as what happened in that event, in that situation. From all sounds of it, it was a complete failure by law enforcement in this case of how they acted and reacted. But the question at hand right now that's going on in a courtroom down in Texas right now is whether or not this man that you see right here, all right, whether or not he is someone who should be held accountable for failing to act. And yesterday we got off to day one of this trial. We've got full coverage on the channel. We're putting up all of day one's coverage and podcasts and desk posts and everything else. We've got the full background report, and we're going to talk a little bit about the case, a little bit about what's going on today. Very important motions hearing happened in court where the judge made a very important ruling as to how this case will play out. And we're going to talk about all of that here as we go through some of the coverage that we've provided. I would invite you to get in there and watch some of the pieces because this is a very, very important case as far as how we view law enforcement and what their obligations are in certain situations. Because it appears here that this is one of these situations where prosecutors might have allowed a motion to grab hold and that they might be holding the wrong person accountable, or at least in this case, the wrong person accountable for what they're saying happened, and that they're relying on witnesses who are not accurate, not reliable, emotionally driven, and they went out and they got an indictment, which if you know anything about indictments, my dad used to always tell me, a good prosecutor could indict a ham sandwich. An indictment means nothing, which is why it requires you to have ethical prosecutors who are supposed to be there to vet a case and say, can this case meet the standard we need at trial, which is beyond a reasonable doubt. And this case has a lot of questions as to whether or not that is going to be able to happen. Let's jump in. Let's start talking about it. All right, so let's jump in here. This is the background report. We're not going to go through everything, but it was a 77-minute disaster. For 77 minutes, essentially, if you're unfamiliar with this case, this happened down in Uvalde, Texas. Well, Mr. Gonzales faces 29 counts of endangerment of students for his response to the Robb Elementary School shooting. Kids spent 77 minutes inside this elementary school while law enforcement failed to take action. And as a result, many children lost their lives, got injured, and it was a terrible, terrible, terrible situation. There were 400 law enforcement officers gathered in the area, gathered in the hallways, gathered in the building. And as is going to be shown in this trial, there was an incredible breakdown. But the question is who should be held accountable for that breakdown? Right now, prosecutors want to hold Adrian Gonzales accountable. And we're right now in the process of seeing the evidence to determine whether or not there's evidence beyond a reasonable doubt to support the charges, which could result in a significant amount of time in prison. Now, Mr. Gonzales was the first officer to arrive at Robb Elementary School that day. He was on scene before the shooter even entered the building. And that's the reason why he right now is on trial, because prosecutors claim that he could have taken action to have stopped the shooter and chose not to. His defense says, no, you've got it wrong. That's not true. That he arrived on the scene, he showed up to help. It was not his school. He was a school resource officer from another location. He got on scene. He never saw the shooter enter the building. He never knew exactly where the shooter was in time, and that he wasn't even completely sure of what he was going on to at the time, because the way this whole thing happened, it was unclear what was actually happening, whether or not this was a scenario where they had an accident because the shooter's car wrecked in front of the school when he was trying to turn into the school. And it was not known at the time that he was coming to do harm to anyone inside the school. So it was believed he was simply fleeing from police officers who had responded to the scene. And according to this gentleman's defense, he was going there to secure the building, not stop a mass shooting at a school. And that until he realized that that was happening, it had gone beyond out of his control. And then at the same time, he didn't even have the equipment to appropriately deal with things with this guy because of the weapon that the shooter was using, and that it could have pierced and would have pierced the vest that he had and would have been no match for his 9mm Glock, even if he would have engaged, and could have resulted in even additional bloodshed if he would have gotten into a firefight with this guy. Now, that shooter was eventually killed and was eventually taken out by a SWAT team, but that happened 77 minutes after this gentleman arrives, which is why he's being held accountable for endangering all these children's lives for what they're saying was a failure to act. But the problem is there's a lot of problems with this case, and they're already on display. And the first day of trial got stopped because of potential prosecutorial misconduct, which the judge today found was not intentional misconduct, but instead it was negligence, where they failed to turn over reports that indicated that a witness had now placed the shooter on the same side of the building as Mr. Gonzales, even though at no point in time ever did she say that in previous reports. And it became aware that the prosecutors had become aware of this and failed to report it to the defense. As a result, to report on this instance, what's going to be happening with that is the judge did rule today, and we will be having the coverage out. The live stream is already up on the channel, but we will be showing the full live events with a no breaks edition as well, and targeted points of arguments and things that happen in this hearing. But the judge ultimately said that testimony is out. They're going to let the defense go what they call unring the bell, meaning they're going to get to cross-examine the witness. The defense attorney inexplicably, I don't know what this is my research on the defense attorney. I always like to do research on him, is that this guy is a pretty competent guy, but he is, I think, he didn't want a mistrial because I think in their eyes it's going well, but he also wants to go in and unring this bell because, as he said, listen, it is a problem because this witness has already said these things. She gave very emotional testimony. So how do you overcome that? Because the jury's already seen that, and that was his argument today. Well, half-hearted argument to the judge, which he did raise. He did make his record, but the judge ultimately said, no, this doesn't rise to a level of a mistrial. You can cross-examine her. You can go in and confront her with the statements and show the jury that she's a liar or mistaken or was completely unaware, was in an emotional state and is now remembering things that she never remembered before. And then we're going to tell the jury you can't consider her testimony at all because this was there was essentially issues with this, and then they're going to move on. But the defense, of course, is correctly holding that it's going to be hard for the jury to just separate this and say, well, we've never heard this, especially with the impact that her testimony had on them and that it's tainted the entire jury. Now, we saw a case earlier or later in 2025 where a judge rightly, and I believe that judge would have declared a mistrial here. Instead, this is a Texas judge who, apparently doesn't view things in the light that judge did. And that was in a New Hampshire case where a gentleman was charged of killing his pregnant girlfriend. And they heard testimony regarding a police statement. And he basically said, they've heard it, they've heard it. And there was a culmination of other things that had happened in the case up until that moment. But he said, it's there. There's no way to get them to unhear it. And this is done in such a way that there's no way to undo this. And that testimony, in my opinion, yesterday should have risen to that level, but it didn't. Anyways, the trial will be proceeding tomorrow. It will be a very interesting start tomorrow, so you definitely want to get in there. But the day this happened was on May 24th, 2022. And like I said, we get into all of the background of exactly what occurred. And it was absolutely horrific. And this trial is going to be a very, 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 very difficult trial. It's to hear everything that happened. Now, give me a moment here. We're going to pull up the coverage here of, let's see here. So we'll go into the first witness, because what we want to talk about here is that the defense, the first witness that got on the stand yesterday, right? The first witness that testifies in this case, testifies, his name was Gilbert Limones. He worked at a funeral home across the street from Robb Elementary. And this is key here to understanding that the prosecutors have painted the picture that this gentleman, what we are supposed to believe is that this gentleman went to the school and basically was not interested in helping students. He was interested in saving his life. Now, here's the problem with charging this guy, with charging the individual that they charge. And this is what the defense is leaning heavily on. I think it's a very, 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 it's a very, very, very persuasive argument. Because what they show with this witness, now in this testimony, they show you the crash in front of the school of the shooter's car. And here, if you look right here, this is where the witness that's testifying, he's walking over to the shooter. The shooter starts shooting at them and they retreat back in. And what happens is there's a couple things that he sees as he starts observing. He sees the defendant arrive very fast, driving towards the scene, not away from the scene. And right there, to me, the case ends. Okay? Because at that point, it's now a matter of Monday morning quarterbacking a situation where it's like he's doing everything he thinks he needs to do, and the information, it's a live situation. At that moment, when you're talking about the endangerment of a child and calling him a coward, if he was a coward, he doesn't respond to the call. If he was a coward, he doesn't go to the school. At this moment, with this testimony, this case should have been tossed out, in my opinion. That's my opinion. Now, the rest we're going to hear, because the state gets to put on a case and they get to talk about the heinousness of the case. They get to talk about everything they found. They get to talk. The judge even ruled very controversially that they're going to get to see very prejudicial pictures, which are going to inflame these jurors. And as the defense said, it's going to change these jurors' lives. It's going to change everyone's life who is watching this case and hearing about the horribleness of this situation. In this testimony, we got to hear the 911 call and the absolute terror that was in the voice of Gilbert Limones as he's describing in real time what he's seeing and describing this man going to the school and seeing him now start shooting at the school. But the important part here is that the premise of the prosecution is that this defendant is a coward and that he went there and that he was making decisions to protect himself and not the children. And here, the problem with that is he showed up. If he would have been the school resource officer, if he would have had a reason to be there, but he showed up, and as the defense laid out in their opening, he immediately went to work. And as he's going to say, and as the defense showed through this witness that said he saw him racing towards it, and they showed the picture to the jury of this defendant racing to the scene. Okay? And that to me is to me takes the guts out of the state's case. And then you start talking about you see now where witness number 2, which isn't up on that article is going to be delivered here shortly. But witness number 2 talks to the jury. We've already got the video up on the channel. But witness number 2 essentially says that, or it uncovers for the jury that guess what? Protocols weren't being followed on that the real people who need to be held accountable. Yeah, there were a lot of failures. And one of them being that they failed to secure the school. That there were locks that weren't repaired. There was a door that was broken and the lock wasn't repaired. They were using magnets to override the lock security system. And they had an unlocked door that allowed that gunman to get inside that school. And all of that, none of that is the fault of Adrian Gonzales. None of that is the fault of this man who showed up at the scene. And when he showed up, wasn't even 100% certain. No one was certain what was happening or what was going to happen. And as was shown with this witness, he claimed to have seen the shooter shooting at the playground, or I believe it was a playground or a pavilion. And the defense attorney showed him and said, "What if I told you that there's no evidence that happened? Would you be surprised?" And he said, "Yes, I would." And the point of that by the defense attorney was to show, hey, you were in an emotional moment, and your testimony and your reflections can't be relied upon. And I thought that was very effective. So, look, this is a case that we all need to watch, because this is one of these cases that we're seeing happen where prosecutors are overreaching. Prosecutors are prosecuting based on emotion, not evidence. And that's not how this is supposed to work. But the good news is we have a jury system. We are not Europe right now or UK, where they're trying to do away with the jury trial system. That would be an absolute disaster. Should not happen, right? We require 12 citizens to agree that the state and the government has evidence to find one of our citizens guilty of the crimes that they're alleging. And that's what's happening now in this case. And he does appear. I like Nico, the attorney Nico. He's very, very good. And he gave the second half of the opening statement. And I love his approach. I've watched him. There was another case I watched him in. I do believe, I can't remember the case, but it was a case earlier in 2025 that I watched him in, and I thought he was excellent in that case. And I think he's doing a good job in this case as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this plays out. But everybody, listen, you want to go to the website, keep your eyes on the website. We're doing exclusive coverage there analysis. Of course, we'll be coming in and out, and we will come to you with our news breaks, breaking down pieces and things of the trial and giving you updates as this thing progresses. So make sure you're paying attention to that as well. And in the meantime, guys, remember, in due process we trust. Due process is the key to fairness and ensuring this thing is done correctly. And when due process rights are respected, when due process is given to each defendant, regardless of the heinousness of the crime, it works. Trust me, it works. I've seen it work. I've been around it, and I had a dad who it was his life mission to ensure due process and fairness for all criminal defendants out there, and for anyone that comes in contact with the system. Because when they're coming in contact with the system, when the government's trying to take your rights away and your freedom away, it should not be easy. And when they try to make it easy, we have to push back. In the meantime, guys, in due process we trust. Until we talk again, let justice prevail, and I'll talk to you soon.
The system's rigged, man, it's time to break free. Eyes wide open, gotta see what I see. Standing on the front lines, fighting for the truth. Lift the veil of lies, it's time to be the proof. Take a stand, don't you back down. Raise your voice, let's shake the town. We're the voices that won't be ignored. Breaking chains, yeah, we're ready for war. With the power of the people, we'll make them see a world of justice, united and free. United and free.